Right.
Yeah, you know.
Would you like a pen or anything?
No, I can use my fingers. Just before you start, so you know, this just came last weekend. It's very exciting. I don't have the first copy because Liberty Prairie Conservancy and the CAG funded, the Waukegan Harvesters Advisory Group, funded the first book, and it has Arthur on it, on Lake Baikal. They do not have all of the resources in Russia that we have in environmental education.
Right.
Now, when I went to school way back in the, et cetera. No, I just want to give you a little background here for your thing. In 1957, anybody?
I'm the oldest.
No, I bet I am. But anyway, yeah, I know. But it was required. But did you ever take an environmental education course?
Heavens no.
Between K and 12?
Heavens no.
No,
We called it biology.
We had biology.
We didn't talk about environmental aspects.
Right. Did you? No, it's been required in the state of Illinois since 1957. And you guys,
in Iowa.
yeah, but
Michigan.
But still, I mean, we're all Midwest, and it was. You had how much? A snippet?
Yeah, probably.
You didn't have a whole. Okay, so figure what's out there today. If you went and asked, Research Waukegan Harbor, anything like that, or environmental education. Illinois has environmental education standards, like they have math, science, et cetera standards. Russia had nothing from pre-perestroika, and we were working. This is my colleague, Dr. Elena Kuzamanova, and she's been here many times. And when she comes back, hopefully this fall, you're welcome to have her as a guest lecturer. We helped her write the first book in Russia on Lake Baikal and environmental education.
Wonderful.
And it would be like somebody writing it on Lake Michigan. And it's got Lake Michigan pictures in it, it's got text and it's got pictures of us in it, etc. This just came last Saturday. It's a sequel to it, and it's taking the prehistory, from the dinosaurs on up. And so you're looking at all, when you go out and pick up a stone, ooh, this is pretty, what's this? Type of thing.
Somebody should translate it for English.
Well, actually, that's a project. We'd like to do one on Lake Michigan. It'd be similar because it hasn't been done. There's all these little test water, do this, look at the butterfly type of thing. But there's nothing that's a unit on the Great Lakes like that. So anyway, it's a concept. But
Lake Forest College would be interesting.
Well, offers on the table, and there's and.
So I may ask you to talk a little bit about that again when we're because that's very
critical.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you not staying, Art?
I'm going to run back.
You're going to sneak in and out. Okay. All right. Is this on?
Yeah, it's recording now.
Oh, great.
You're on. It's your baby.
It is. I don't want to start with that. Well, Dave was going to edit me clean anyway.
Yeah, it's not precious or anything. Just whenever you want to start is fine. Yeah, we can always turn whatever you don't want.
Today we are interviewing Susie Schreiber about
I stop talking.
Okay, sorry. It's called cooperative overlapping. Today we are interviewing. This is bad. See now how self-conscious I am.
No,
getting.
put that down and just say today we are interviewing.
Today we are interviewing Susie Schreiber. I thought we'd begin by all introducing ourselves. I'm Kathy Dorman. I teach in the psychology and environmental study departments.
Yeah, it's not giving. Yeah, would you hold the microphone?
You want me to start one more time?
Yeah, would you?
All right, I'll try to do better now. Today we are interviewing Susie Schreiber. I thought we'd begin by introducing ourselves. I'm Kathy Dorman. I teach in the psychology department and the environmental studies program.
I'm Laura Stahl, and I'm an English major here at Lake Forest College and also a student worker on the Lake Effect project.
Sebastian DiClemente. I am an environmental studies major here at Lake Forest, and I am the student worker and student coordinator of the Archive project for Lake Effect.
And I'm Susie Schreiber.
I first learned about Susie Schreiber when I was using Nancy Nichols' memoir, Lake Effect, as one of the texts in the environmental studies public health class. I wanted to take my class to Waukegan to see the Superfund sites that were mentioned in her book. When I asked around, I was told that I should contact Susie Schreiber, who was and is chair of the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group, which we're calling CAG. True?
True.
She agreed to lead us on a Superfund tour, and we were all impressed with her knowledge. So, some questions for you to begin with. How did you first become involved in the environmental issues in Waukegan Harbor?
That's sort of a long story. I was serving on several environmental boards in the state of Illinois at the time, and was asked by Illinois Audubon Society to replace their person on the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group. That was in 1993. At that time, I had been working down on the Joliet Arsenal, being converted over to the now Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie. And Medewan, by the way, means healing in Potawatomi. And had obviously a fair amount of experience through that process, and it was closer to Glencoe to come up to Waukegan than to drive to Joliet a couple times a week. So that's how it all started.
So 1993.
That's when I first became involved in the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group and the issues there. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the the Citizens Advisory Group, how was that formed? Who formed it? When was it formed?
Well, you have to go back to Teddy Roosevelt back in 1909, and he set up the Boundary Waters Treaty, which is the treaty between the United States, Canada, and the tribal nations, the First Nations, governing the water issues between Canada and the United States from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And fast forward to the post-war industrial, blooming of the Illinois lakeshore and the Indiana lakeshore, and you find lots of industries feeding a post-war economy and growing population, returning veterans, and good jobs and good industries. And then fast forward to Rachel Carson in the early 1960s and Silent Spring, and all of a sudden people started to scratch their heads and take a look at Gary and Hammond and Waukegan and say, oops. And at that time there was sort of an enlightenment of the entire North American continent. The governments of Canada and the United States looked at the issues of the Great Lakes, all five of them, and the ancillary waters that feed into them, the whole watershed, and said, we have some major problems on this 20% of the world's fresh water supply. So under the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909, they identified 43 areas of concern on the Great Lakes that were really icky, yucky, nasty, gross, and of great concern, and that would have a direct effect on how long the stability of the Great Lakes would be a viable water use for the population that draws upon it. They identified 43 between Canada and the United States and the tribal nations. They, I think about 33 are in the United States, 33 or 34, the remaining ones are in Canada, and they set up parameters by which each of the area concerns had to set up a remedial action plan and a citizens advisory group to guide the cleanup, because each of them had different issues. I mean, some of them have overlapping issues, but each area is a unit unto itself. Obviously, the state of Michigan got hit the most by this because they have the whole mitten, and they have the UP, and that creates a lot more shoreline and a lot more responsibility. Lake Michigan has 10 of the 43 areas of concern, and Illinois is one of those 10. We are the only area of concern in the state of Illinois. Illinois has 63 miles of shoreline, half in Lake County, half in Cook County. So there is no guidance in Illinois other than Waukegan Harbor for our state government, to work this forward. So we still had to follow the International Joint Commission's guidance on setting up the Area of Concern Citizens Advisory Group, and that has to be 50% businesses, environmental groups, state and local and regional governments, federal government units, etc. Each one sets it up in a manner that fits their unique situation, but their goal is that they have to clean everything up.
So, in your opinion, how has this Citizens Advisory Group been working in Waukegan? Is it working toward its mission?
It's painful.
Why is
It's
that?
extraordinarily painful because it's like herding cats for 20 some odd years. But you're herding cats at a federal, state, regional, and local level. And things change and opinions change and you find out new problems and you have to coordinate them so that you get them all out on the table. It's a growing process. It truly is, and it's a learning process. And I think one of the interesting things is the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group has a number of the original members still serving on it. And we meet every month, the third Thursday of every month, and we have met since August of 1990. We do not meet in December, but boy, we sure work hard in December. But you do get 1 month off. But and we have always had people coming to the meetings and taking an interest, and it's because of the continuity of the membership. And if someone's retiring, they are replaced. And it's very exciting that we're moving forward now and actually getting some things done. But it's taken a heck of a lot of perseverance.
Okay.
All right, I was going to ask you some questions about the Superfund sites and the toxins in them. And I was wondering if you could explain the nature of the 3 Superfund sites in Waukegan.
Well, let's just make sure we have a bigger map out then, if that's what you're asking. That's north, right? That's north. Okay, sorry. I always like to have my map facing the same way that north is. Sorry about the holes. The actual 21 years didn't cause the holes, but lots of use of this particular map. You have some interesting facts that you need to consider here. This is the Johns Manville Superfund site right here. This is Illinois Beach State Park. This used to be ComEd. It's now Midwest Generation's coal-fired power plant. They own from the power station back towards the lake, and actually ComEd owns all of the utility lines that, the grid that gives us all our electricity. And North Shore Sanitary District owns this sector of the lake. These all came in the late, just after World War I, generally. So this lake shore was not as you view it today. Historically, post-glacier, pre-settlement, the lakeshore came in like this and turned and went along here. And here's Sheridan Road. Here's your bluff line that you see from the Wisconsin line down to about Wilmette Harbor, and then it gently tows down into the Chicago Plain. But this is your same bluff line that you have right here that your college is situated upon. And this was all a wetland all along here. And then it came just to the shore, and the same kind of shore that you would see today, running out to the beach. This is unique. This is a peat dune swale. And it's unique on the Great Lakes and in the world, and on Lake Huron, in the northern portion in the bay of up there, there is a much larger peat dune swale. But this is very unique and very, very special to the state of Illinois for species and just composition. It has many, many Panay communities. There's P-A-N-E, and there's the swale, and you're down in this little community that lives down there, this environmental community, and then you go up on this ridge. Now, prior to World War I, this was just kind of this big old dune, and everybody recreated on it. The U.S. Army had operations on it. There was a German prisoner of war camp there in, the North Unit. And so it had many uses. It had tank practices going on it, boom, boom. And so it's not the gentle community that you see today. And in 1955, there was a number of area citizens that began to realize the value of this shoreline is, it's just prior to Rachel Carson. and people were waking up to the issues along here. Johns Manville was considered a very good neighbor. Whenever asked, they would, as a corporate unit, help the communities around. They were hoping to settle, there's plans and maps to take this whole area and have a town and a village here. And because it was in this peat dune swale and was tended to have fires in the fall when things got dry, they said, oh, the village of Beach Park said, could you put an asbestos road in? You know, because that's fireproof. So sure, we'll put all our scraps in. So yes, an asbestos road went in there. It's still there today. And it was used, you know, it's used when they need to bring the fire trucks down because they can bring them and they're sitting on something that's safe. Now, this was considered good cooperation, you know, with the development of the area. They also were asked in the early 60s, somewhere in that era, and I may be off on a few years, but this little northern section here was an add-on that they bought then, and then they were asked by the builders of the Amstutz Expressway if they could use this as a borrow pit. And they looked and said, well, gee, we're not using it for anything. Sure, you can, you know, borrow material from there to help build the footings under the bridge and the expressway. No, it's a good neighbor thing, right? So that's what happened. The same with ComEd. They have their intake and outflow from their coal-fired plant here, and they have a pier, and this is an excellent fishing pier out here. And for years and years and years, people came from Wisconsin, because it's just a few minutes up the road, down here to fish, and the fish liked it in the winter because there was a nice warming pond. You know, why go anywhere else when it's nice and heated? You know, everything's fine. And the fishermen said, you know, well, I can go out on a nice cold day, but I can catch fish, so came here and fished. That has since 9/11 been closed off for security reasons. But it was certainly a corporate, you know, compatible unit for the general public to have this. North Shore Sanitary, well, everybody likes to have good sanitary service and good, you know, good toilets and likes to flush, so that's located there. They needed to have a lot of water. Then you have Johns Manville, and that started out as Johnson Motors. And I mean, this sounds like a very good economy. You've got lots of permanent jobs for people, and Johnson Motors was making outboard motors. It was post two world wars, and motors and recreational boating and fishing was an up-and-coming industry, and they provided employment for approximately 2,000 people at their units down here. And in order to make motors, you have die-cast units, and you have to use grease and oils, and this is the old die-cast unit, this is the new die-cast unit. And remember, this is all fill, because I said, pre-settlement, this was your shoreline. In 1891, the city of Waukegan and the Army Corps of Engineers figured it was silly to build wooden docks that got taken away by ice every year. So, you know, instead of having to run out and build a new dock for all the shippers, because they were shipping grain and wood, and this was a port that was feeding the building of Chicago after the fire, and, you know, just the lake transportation and shipping industries. And it really was farmers, you know, bringing their grain and materials down to the ports. So the Corps built Government Pier in 1891. That now stops the littoral drift of sand, and this began to build up. Your water plant wasn't here in 1891, it was over here on the shoreline. And this looked like just, when you're down in Chicago and you see the picture of Lakeshore Drive by the Drake Hotel, and everybody always focuses, you know, on the beach down there, and, you know, this big expanse. This, from here to here, just looked like beach. And like the early pictures of Chicago with a little teeny railroad, dinky little railroad running along it, you know, and then the shippers, and then people who were fishermen and things like that. So all of this was kind of wetland that just sort of filled in. And somebody would say, oh, I'm building something, oh, well, come down here and dump it. You know, we'd like to, you know, be able to use this land. So Johns Manville builds up, ComEd, now Midwest Generation builds up, North Shore Sanitary locates here, and Midwest Generation. You have to also understand that you had Abbott in North Chicago, a large pharmaceutical firm. And this is our whole, that plus wire mills and steel mills and things like this, but from here down to North Chicago. So they said, gee, we have waste, we have medical waste and things like that. Well, here's a wetland up here, we'll just park it right here. And I'm telling you this story because this is how you get your third Superfund site. Superfund site is Johns Manville, Outboard Marine, and then Abbott Waste. Well, we need to find a place to put it, so they relocated it to a section of the Waukegan River on the North Branch on Yeoman Creek. And others put their waste in there too. I mean, the city, the park districts, the schools, everybody. It was just a dump, okay? But it got it off the lakefront. Then North Shore Gas came in and said, oh, well, this will make a good site where we can coke, you know. How are you going to heat and, you know, do things like that? So this was a coking site after that. This was also General Motors owned it and worked it, and it was also a coking site. So this, lots of jobs, big name industries, all, you know, intent on producing the American dream, post-World War II economy. And the shoreline here, if you look at the 1985 shoreline, or look at the 1945 or 1925 shoreline, it was just a little stretch of beach like this, and there would be ladies, you know, in their tall skirts and little kids playing in the water, but ladies were holding their skirts up and walking gently up to their knees in the water. But everything else was lake. The lake has lowered with the advent in 1891 of Government Pier. The shoreline has changed, and all of this has now become, since about 1985, a very high quality dunal area. Illinois, it's equal to Illinois Beach State Park, and it has easily accessible interdunal tide pools and things that change daily. It is very exciting. And this area then, from 1985, you know, back to the 1920s, that's how this developed. Then in 1985, you had this, well, let's build a recreational harbor down here. So approximately 1985 to 1990, this recreational harbor was placed here. Axco Nobel is a research and development unit. It's now a international firm. As a matter of fact, 4 of the firms down here are 3 are international and 1 is national. But Axco Nobel makes aerospace coatings and does the research and development there. And they're located right by the mouth of the Waukegan River. The interesting part about Waukegan Harbor as an area of concern that you have to look at from an ecological perspective is this is a carved out harbor. The Corps of Engineers, when they built this, just built little slips in here, and that's the old slip 1, slip 2 was here, and this is the slip 1, slip 2, and slip 3, my mistake. And this is now slip 4. But there is no upstream pollution, so once we clean this, we can't say that there's another contaminant source coming in. It's not. The river is south of it, so there's no further contamination. That is one thing that's unique about Waukegan Harbor as one of the 43 areas of concern. Most of the others have some other ongoing potential impairment that could happen. Not saying would, but could happen. So that just gives you a little historical background of the lakefront and its development. So your 3 areas of concern are Johns Manville, Outboard Marine, because they took over Johnson Motor, and then because of the Abbott landfill, what happened? Yes, right here, going to Yeoman Creek, it's now the Yeoman Creek Superfund site. So that's how you get the 3rd Superfund site that's off this current shoreline map. Does that make sense?
Yes. Of the contaminants that have been found in Waukegan Harbor, which are the most problematic in your view?
In the harbor, we're talking about the water,
Yes.
the polychlorinated biphenyls, the PCBs. When Johnson Motors and then Outboard Marine were producing very high quality motors, and remember, everybody when you went out in the lake, whatever lake you used it on, you wanted a good motor, and you didn't want it to die on you in a storm, or if you needed to get in for dinner or things like that. You wanted your motor to work. They made a very high quality motor. And their first die-cast unit was here. And their industrial management was similar to the World War I, World War II eras, management standards. And in the degreasing unit down here, in the die-cast unit, in the degreasing process, the degreasers and the oils, PCBs are a very fine lubricant. They also are very fine nasty things, but they do lubricate well. They're used in ballasts for electric, lights. They were used for many, many different things. But they went down a chase and directly into slip 3 right here. There was no slip 4 at this time. That was built in 1991. So they were going out in practically just solid mass form. When they cleaned, after many years of arguing in the courts that yes, in fact, they were responsible for the PCBs getting out here, the cleanup at that time was considered safe at 50 parts per million. I told you this when I took you around. A big white jar of sugar crystals, and Laura has counted out exactly 1 million little crystals in her jar, put the top on. And then Sebastian came along with a little jar of red ones that you use at Christmas and Valentine's Day, and he counted out 50 little white ones and took them out, and he put 50 little red ones in. That's 50 parts per million, just so you can visualize what that means. And they had to clean to 50 parts per million. So they put a silk curtain right here, and they cleaned by legal decree up here and into here. They took slip 3 and made it into a confined disposal facility. They treated the material down to thermally, treated it down to 50 parts per million, because that was the legal limit. I mean, everything was considered fine after that, and it wouldn't affect the fish and people. They put it here, and they put it right where you see this green space, and I do recall when we were with Lake Forest College and your bus, we came down this back road and found the gates open, which they shouldn't have been, and you wanted to go in, and I said, no, please. I want to keep everybody, above board and clean on this. So we didn't go back here, though we could have. But there's one confined disposal facility, and here's another. You have 1, 2, 3 for this first cleanup. The confined disposal facilities, known as CDFs, are lined, and they have leachate collection systems. So there's a gradient inwards, so you don't have material leaking outwards. And they work very well. And they are tested by the responsible party, the city of Waukegan, who owns this right now. They own all 3 of them right now. They were transferred from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency to the city of Waukegan a number of years ago, and they are by law tested, and everybody wants them tested. There's no argument on that, and they're working very well. That left the remainder of the harbor, the PCBs in the harbor, and there were many other contaminants, but they were of much lesser grade, and they would come just because you had motorboats operating and ships going in and out, and et cetera, and you had steel mills, and there was this was the tannery, the old tannery up here, and there was a tannery down here, and there were coking sites down here, so there was a lot of activity going on that you could get wind blown and just water driven and sources of contaminants. Right now, I am very, very pleased to say that as of about 2 weeks ago, the United States Environmental Protection Agency said that they are going to go ahead with the cleanup of the remainder, 240,000 cubic yards of contaminated material, mostly PCBs, Sebastian. And the dewatering unit will be up here. It will be hydraulically dredged. When you do it, you pull it up and you put it in great big sausages like a nylon stocking and suck it in, and then you have to dewater that. And all of that water has to go through a treatment plant. Then it is returned to the lake. It's clean gray water, but this is a accepted practice throughout North America and most of the advanced countries, in cleaning water. So you're taking all the contaminants out. And then the residual contaminated material, all of which is under 50 parts per million, will be placed up here between these two sites. So all of your PCB will be held up here and in this one site here for this particular Superfund site. But you will get just about everything out, and a clean layer of sand will be placed on this. So this will then be considered clean and meeting Lake Michigan standards. You will then not have fish eating off the substrate and the sediments who are eating macroinvertebrates and little bits of algae that are PCB contaminated, because it moves up the food chain, not only to the people who, for sustenance, just low-income people who fish off here and use, twice a week, this is their source of fish. You also have it moving up the food chain in the fish that are being fed on by the terns and the other, migratory birds, and by coyotes, just carrying, it just moves up the food chain in a number of different ways. There were certainly problems with the terns who used to nest down here. This is the good part about Midwest Generation and previously ComEd, because the fox and all the predators couldn't get to the tern nests out in these little protected areas, and the employees were very careful to work with the DNR and the U.S. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and put fences around so the terns could fly in, eat, feed their chicks, and Freddie Fox and Ricky Raccoon couldn't come chomp on them at night. So this was very nice. But then the terns, for some reason, stopped nesting there, and they went down to Great Lakes. You know how it is, better view, better something. And the peregrine falcons are now nesting up here, and Midwest Generation works with the Field Museum, the Lincoln Park Zoo, the IDNR, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and there's a hack box up here for peregrine falcons. And very interesting component that you can watch on a webcam 24/7 when it's going on. They just banded the one chick this year. This is a concern. We don't know why all of a sudden this year the 4 eggs, only 1 hatched, because usually all 4 hatch, all 4 are banded, and I've actually been up there and held them. Those are tough little buggers. They don't like being banded. You've got to hold them just right, or sometimes they win. They lose. They get their band, but you also lose. But it's a wonderful experience, and it's just a great opportunity. But they feed on birds, who are eating off of the seashore, or the lakeshore and the intertidal, areas and the nearshore communities. So it is really important that we do clean these up. And we found new PCB sources just this past year that are being cleaned up between now and the end of July along here, that were in this ditch along here because of the processes that occurred here. So this was a major outflow source of PCBs directly into the lake, not just into the harbor. And we've pretty much been able to identify that now. This was all cleaned up last year.
All right. Why is Waukegan called an environmental justice community?
Waukegan is a community of approximately 92,000 individuals. So there's about 37 different languages spoken in the K through 8 portion of the school district. Probably a similar number in the high school languages. It's always has been a multicultural community. It started out in the late 1840s, 1850s as Little Fort. Waukegan is the Potawatomi word for Little Fort. And it's always been, multicultural, made up of immigrants who came here to work, first as farmers and settlement, and then in the industries that were developing along here, excellent jobs. And you had people over in Europe banging and wailing on each other, and if you weren't the primogenitor son who inherited the land, you had to go somewhere, and this was a nice fertile land that looked like Northern Europe, and good place to come. And very strong, sound urban peripheral community between Chicago and Milwaukee. And right now, it has a huge influx of Hispanic people, and a lot of the other lesser but many immigrant cultures. And for environmental justice, it's not right that you have a contaminated lakefront and I don't just mean the harbor here, I mean all of the industries along here. It's environmental justice for every single citizen who lives there to have the right to have a lakeshore, the sort of the front edge of Lake County, that is high quality for everybody that lives in Lake County. It's environmental justice, excuse me, to say that your lakeshore is usable from the tiniest macroinvertebrate up to the human being, and to use it fairly and evenly, both for cleanup and pollution and also for recreation. And those are issues that environmental justice would come in and say, should this all be closed, gated, high-rise? And that's a very strong statement, because no, it won't all be closed and gated. But, you know, you can have some people envisioning, wow, nicely cleaned up this, and I could have this. But environmental justice means it should be able to be used by everybody, and that there should be a seat at the table, and the decision-making should be available to everybody. I think that's what we're very excited about right now. I mentioned to you, Kathy, that we had last year on Memorial Day, it's been just about 1 year today, that we heard that of the Great Lakes restoration money, the $475 million that President Obama put on the table in the budget last year for the Great Lakes restoration, the entire watershed, that we got $1.43 million of it for the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group. And I would say for everybody in this room and for everybody, you know, in this whole Lake County, you know, North Chicago, northern from Chicago, city of Chicago, suburban area, recreational use. And it's very exciting because we are restoring Bowen Park, this 60-acre park. There's 30 acres of ravine. It's the second highest quality of ravine in the state of Illinois in the Lake Michigan watershed. It is just about equal to the open lands ravine that is so highly noted and received. We have just about the same number of floristic species, and I would probably say that by end of September, October, there will be more species noted up here than down there. It also doesn't have a road through it. It has its original creek through it. And that's highly significant on a very, very developed Illinois shoreline of Lake Michigan when you don't have a road. It also is where Jane Addams had her summer camp. Children came out from Hull House with Jane, and she met her good friend Mrs. Bowen up at Mrs. Bowen's cottage up here. And Mrs. Bowen graciously let Jane Addams develop her whole summer camp for years, from the late teens, early 20s through the early 60s. Campers still come back and say, may I have a tour? I wanted to bring my family and I wanted to see my old campgrounds. And it is now one of the best parks in the city of Waukegan, and it's open to everybody. And it's very exciting that we got restoration money for that. We got restoration money for invasive species from here all the way down to here, all of these intertidal dunal areas. And it's about one-third, and very excitingly, one-third public education and PR, so that people can understand and they can participate in the decisions and how this will be developed and use this as a template from Racine down to Chicago. So it's very exciting.
So do you feel that the people of Waukegan have focused more on the pollution in the harbor, in Yeoman's Creek, or do you feel that they have focused more on the loss of industry and jobs as a result of the plants closing down?
Oh, I think it's a huge casserole of both.
Okay.
When you lose your job, and anybody who lives in the world today knows it's a really tough economy and a tough way to live. Losing your job is hard, and it certainly affects the whole infrastructure of the community and your taxing body and what your parks and your libraries and your city can do, how much money you have to maintain your infrastructure and your roads and your water, your sewers, you know, everything that affects your city is affected by the number of jobs and the employment capacity that your city has and that the residents have in having a solid income. Sociologically, I mean, that's really important. And from an environmental problem, I think what is really hard is you and I, all of us, could go up in grab an ice cream cone and look out at the lake today and say, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous today. There's no trash, the lake looks blue, it's all picked up, there's no dirty barrels, everything's fine. What do you mean it's polluted? They don't understand the nature of the pollution. In the same way, in the way that Barbara Nichols was looking at it, she was looking at it from a different perspective. She was living a good life, an enjoyable life, being raised in Waukegan, and so was her sister. But if you look at it today, you don't see the pollution, the residual pollution. You just see land, and why can't I use it? A developer, why can't I build here? Someone else, why can't I do parasailing? Why can't I do all these things? It's all here, it looks clean, and you're just being mean. and most people don't know that the fish here are of lesser quality than they are here. Now, there's no one to say that the fish that's here this morning hasn't tromped out here and then come back in. Some happen to be near shore, little rock bass, but big old carp could go down to Great Lakes and saunter on up here for the evening and then tool up here or go down there. Some of them can be up in here. We're not saying that this is a closed aquarium, but having this cleaned with the bottom substructure, the sediment cleaned, so that wherever the fish is moving about, they have a clean place to eat, and you have a clean place to fish and to recreate. That becomes environmental justice for everybody. It is not environmental justice to say that this is government pier built in 1891 by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, been open to the public ever since, and still is. But if you were to privatize that and say, no, we're closing that off, that wouldn't be environmental justice. Because it means that you couldn't go up this afternoon. You could buy your ice cream cone, but you couldn't walk out there. But yesterday you could. So environmental justice isn't, by what you look like or where you live. It's what you can do and how you can use the Waukegan River, the 11.6 miles of the river, and how you can use the shoreline of Lake Michigan. It's everybody's environment.
Why do you think the pollution situation in the harbor got so out of hand?
Well, a lot of people had a different set of opinions and didn't want to spend a lot of money to clean it up. And, who's responsible? If you're 4 years old and your bedroom is dirty, and I don't mean dirty, but just, there's Lego and stuffed animals and, et cetera, and pillows all around, and someone asks you to clean it up, your inclination is, I'm busy, I don't have time, as a 4-year-old. And sometimes, if you're running a very good, vibrant industry, you don't necessarily want to say that, oops, mea culpa. And you also have a whole a corporate environment of, here's our dollar amount. We're making money, we're giving good jobs, and that's keeping the whole community running well. And, the argument between scientists and the rest of the world, is a PCB bad? I mean, we all, 3 of us in this room, grew up when there was a great big argument over whether the PCB was really that bad. I mean, that's why they only had to clean up to 50 parts per million. Right now, we have to clean up to less than 1 part per million. So your 50 little red sugar crystals in there are going down to 1 or less. And you get to put the 49 back. That's what, it's the argument of what is clean. We probably, back to one of your original questions is, how did we get founded and on what precepts have we operated? This was easy to do in the courts with the lawyers. It wasn't easy, but it happened and it got done. So that part got cleaned up. What you get down is, okay, we have to clean the rest. How clean is clean? The first 7 years that I spent on the CAG, me and my colleagues were asking the Corps of Engineers and scientists and the US EPA, how clean is clean? What do you want us to clean to? Because we can't figure out how many cubic yards we need to take out until you can tell us what level of PCB contamination we should clean to. So in the early 2001, it was just when Mark Kirk was elected to the Congress of the United States, as I remember him standing out here saying, we've done it. We have figured it out. It's under 2 parts per million. Now it's under 1 part per million. But when you finally got that finite number, then you could go back to all of the players and say, okay, we can do our testing in here and seeing what the contaminant level is, and we have to clean to, 2 parts or less, or 1 part or less, and you can figure out how many cubic yards and how much it costs and who's going to do it and where it's going to go. Prior to that, you couldn't. So you have this huge discussion in the international community of how clean is clean.
My questions are about the current status of the harbor.
Mhm.
And my first question is, could you please explain the concept of a remedial action plan?
A remedial action plan involves much of what we were just discussing.
Mhm.
You have to define the problem. You have to have all the parties who are in any way responsible at the table to agree on what the problem is. And then you also have to agree on the manner in which you're going to achieve cleanup. I will use the Coke site. The Superfund site for outboard marine is right where you had your bus, right there. So it comes out to the lakeshore, down here, and like this. So it's a big rectangle, but it encompasses all of this area. I said North Shore Gas, General Motors also used this property here, prior to Outboard Marine buying it and just consolidating all of their properties. And they were coking on that site. In the early 1990s, North Shore Gas came to the table and they were extraordinarily cooperative. I mean, they wanted to do the right thing. They own this site. They have this site right here that used to be the Abbott, and they have another site down here. And they were working under the then regulations with the Illinois EPA and the voluntary cleanup. And because you were doing one action on this, well, 2 actions, but it had been tested, so we knew that it was arsenic, antimony, ammonia, very high concentrations, and you certainly don't want to put residents or just, open space, people using it, digging in and whatnot. The water table is only about 1 foot right in here, so it's very close to the water table. I mean, except this is all, shore, just accretion of sand. And they voluntarily began to clean it up, and then due to some actions that the Waukegan City Council took to coordinate, they thought at that time, the cleanup, it made it more difficult for the companies to act under the Illinois voluntary cleanup portion, so they stopped working on that site, and then were able to come in and set a cleanup program up that met the US EPA standards for the Superfund site and met the IEPA standards. And we all have to listen to them and agree on them. And they decided to do a very innovative pump and treat. And this is being done under Superfund, but they were the responsible parties, and they've never denied it. There was denial here. There's no denial here. So we're very pleased to say that as of Tuesday night, May 31st, we will stop pumping from this site. You're 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule for a very high-end bioremediation technology that's going on here. And the water, this is divided into little cells, and there's PCB pipe that's about a diameter like this in a grid under here, and then it sticks up. And they, cell by cell, they treat the water and pump it. They pump the water into the Tri-X building here, the only building standing now on the outboard marine site. And it's treated, and there's 3 or 4 huge tanks that look like a tank farm, for gas, petroleum type unit. They're huge. It is hospital clean in there. The water goes out and into the first tank and analyzed, and then goes in the second tank, and they have these little bugs that you get, and these little bugs only eat ammonia. Now they nibble away, and it's all, how much ammonia is in this big, level that we just pumped out. So you match it, and the little bugs go and eat it for X number of days, and then when the bugs are all done eating, you want to keep your bug supply alive, so you've got to carefully transfer this. It's really neat science, with computers and chemistry and environmental technologies. And then the clean water is pumped into another tank, tested, etc., and then pumped back into the site, cell by cell. So we're finishing the whole cleanup, and it's on here May 31st, next Tuesday, midnight. That part's done. But it will take 2 more months to treat that water, the finishing cells that are out here on the dunes right now, and have the little bugs do their job, and then clean it up and get that reinserted back into the water table. Then they will dismantle all of their fencing and trailers and equipment from these 2 sites, and your beach area will not look as cruddy as it currently does. It looks like a big old construction site. This looks like a big old construction site right now, because they've taken down all of the buildings, and they have just the Tri-X building is left. But the good part, to answer your question, is the Tri-X building is now going to be used for the dewatering. So we're saving $2 million because we can use something that was very successful here, reuse it at our benefit to the taxpayer, for the pump and treat of the cleanup of the harbor. So, we have made some progress, to answer your questions. And we're very excited about that. Not enough, but some. And a lot of progress has been made here. This water unit is actually tipped now down this way. I was just out there last week. This was a settling. I'm not sure why we have this. I think this came from some book. These are all gone. This was all the Johns Manville buildings, for making various asbestos products, roofing tiles, transite pipe, everything. And it located here because it needed quantities of water. So it had this as the settling basis, and so that all of their material that wasn't used in the manufacturing process, but the residual was deposited here. And there are walls around this that are made out of soil, and they're about 20 to 30 feet tall, and this is a big settling basin, so it's higher. It's a plateau that looks out over the lake. And this was all dewatered, and a tarp was sewn together very carefully. They had to figure this out for this particular site, and they sewed it, just like making a quilt, but a very large quilt on about 35 acres. And it's all stitched together, and it covers that residual sediment, from the manufacturing process, so that clean water settles on top. And that would go down to tend about the -7th for structure. You won't get much leakage through there just from the asbestos residuals. And the state of Illinois has put in a new pipe at the very edge along here, so Illinois Beach State Park and the Peat Dune Swales will not drain to this industrial canal. It will drain to the pipe, which goes to a little pump stand here and goes out to the outflow right here on the lake, or the outfall on the lake. So it won't back this up. This contaminant won't get there, and now we're in the process of working with the parties to close off this. And Johns Manville has been cooperative for the most part, I will say. They really have. There are minor things that come along in any problem of this humongous size that you always are going to have a difference of opinion. I mean, truly you are, on land use or how to do something, and that's what takes so long. It just doesn't happen overnight. Like how to eat the pan of brownies. It's simple. All of us in the room can figure out how to eat the pan of brownies pretty quickly. With little, question as how it should be done. Cleaning up a site like this or a site like this, or even this site right here or the tannery site. These are all very complex problems, and you can't take them on all at the same time because one faces the other. So we had to deal with hydrology problems here. We have to deal with, how do you close this off? How do you make a barrier to protect this? How do you keep everything in here intact? This is the Superfund site up here, and how do you reuse this site? So these are all, and how do you put plant material on here that is not going to negatively impact this high-quality Illinois Natural Inventory area? So it's complex. And can you put this back into this site, and separate this borrow pit that never had any contamination in it from the beginning, and rejoin it to its original unit? And then it opens up all other questions about, if this is your original shoreline, and here you can still see residual peat dune swale along here, and we're doing Bowen Park, and I told you how high a quality, ravine it is. It's spectacular. It also has some of the original wetlands here, and you're still getting your water and your hydrology flow here. So can we restore this whole wetland area here, and can we end up putting a bike trail here? So your question is, who's at the table? When are they at the table? When is it appropriate for which sections to be at the table? If you're talking about how to clean this, you're not talking about how to do your bike path. But now that we've got this cleaned and we're working on this, and we can look at this site, and this site's it's like, oh, now who do we bring to the table for environmental justice? How do we do it in a significant manner, and how do we look at the various users? If you're a parasailer, you need this. If you're a Blanding's turtle, you need that. If you're a piping plover, you might consider something else. If you're a coyote, you might think something else. If you're a watercolor painter, you might prefer something. If you're a swimmer or, a jet skier or a biker, I mean, there are many, many, many uses, a plethora of uses. If you're a developer and you say, well, gee, I'd like this for a nice view for here. How will I be able to set to a residential community here? If you're a biker, where can I put it? There's a kayak trail all around Lake Michigan now. You can paddle a kayak all the way around Lake Michigan. But you need to have a place to come in, at night, so that if you could have a place in Kenosha or Racine, and then you could have a place down here, what facilities do I need down here? Where am I going to stay? So it gets to be in a very major planning phase, and that's where our grant is right now. That PR and public education, part of that is for these decisions. That's what's exciting. I'm really charged by that.
My second question was, what was the greatest political obstacle prior to starting the remedial action?
I take the fifth. I take the fifth. We have all walked a very, very long journey. There have been many differences of opinion. We are where we are today. The harbor is going to be cleaned, and we can go forward. Because there were many differences of opinion. And one doesn't overlap the other, but and I say that in jest, but it's been a hard, long journey, and differences of opinions, even from agencies that are involved. You can have within a given agency, and no finger pointing, nothing like this, but you can have the divisions of air, land, and water, and unless you come around the table and say, this is our problem, and you point to a problem, and you're all at the table, if first it has to go to land, and then it has to go to water, and then it has to go to air, and they're getting it for the first time, they're not seeing it, it's kind of linear. And if I were to look back on this process, I would say, isn't there some way to retune and retool our Superfund and our area of concern restorations, so that at least for the initial year, all air, land, and water are all at the table at the same time, so you can see what the initial problems are and where you're going to need to work. And then go off and say, okay, land, do this, and then we'll look at it. But the way that it's often done, not always, often done, is that you give one of those air, land, or water the primary role, and then they do all of their work, then they send it to the next one. So they start from scratch. And then goes to the next one while these two wait. After that's all done, and they think they have all of their issues resolved just within their agency, whether it's Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, United States Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Fish and whatever it is, you have to go through these processes. So how do you finally come to a conclusion? You've had many, many disagreements and many, many different innovative ways of doing it. And are they right or are they wrong? They present problems, they present obstacles. Illinois' law for for water, and if you're dredging your harbor entrance, whether it's Lake Forest or the Waukegan, recreational harbor entrance, you have to meet ammonia standards when you're picking up the goop and you take out the sediment, and then the water drips back into the lake, your ammonia is stirred up. Ammonia is stirred up if you run down here to make a sandcastle this afternoon. you're going to make a drippy castle, and there's a little bit of ammonia that's stirred up. But Illinois' standards are higher than that of the United States standards. So while Superfund says we are meeting all of the federal standards, Illinois says, no, you're not meeting the standards. Now, 63 miles of Illinois shoreline on Lake Michigan. Look at the Mississippi River. If they make an exception here, then what are the people cleaning up issues on the Mississippi River, the Illinois River, any of the other, the Wabash, the Ohio River? Illinois has more water edge than land edge. We are an aquatic state. So Illinois down in Springfield says, oh, but we can't let them do it to the federal standards because then somebody will come down from the rest of the state and say, oh, but they got to do it. So why can't I? So what is a big problem? They're all big problems while you're working on them. When they're done, then you're working on the next one. So I really won't. There are some biggish ones, but everybody meant well.
The next question is, what has been the greatest aid in getting remedial work done?
The greatest aid? Patience, perseverance, respect, sense of humor. I mean, if you don't come to the table with a sense of humor and patience, good Lord. And a vision, and just keeping discussions open. I think probably one of the most difficult problems that human beings have is they tend to want to go get it decided quickly here, and then they'll run out and tell everybody how it's going to be done. And you might have a difference of opinion. And you go, but how come I didn't know? My house is on the other side of the street. But you decided this on this side of the street because the village line happens to be here. I mean, there are communities here where some members of the family sleep in one village and because of the house and the property lines. My house, I pay taxes to Winnetka and Glencoe. But that's just the way it is. But really, the most important thing is to be able to see the big picture, to have a vision, and to see how it's interconnected. And I am so excited in our grant that the education and the public relations part of this is that it's not just for this little stretch of land, open water here, or this stretch here, and this is under national security, so, and for good reason, up here with the power plant. This is under security for a different reason. It's Superfund, but it's asbestos, so they're trying to protect you. This is under, please don't go on it because it's Illinois Nature Preserve. All with different reasons, but from Kenosha to Wilmette, we need to have people get together and say, gee, they're spending a lot of money removing an invasive grass that is very pretty. It's a seagrass green. It's called lime grass. We're spending a lot of money removing invasive lime grass on the dune area so the native marram grass can, it's there, but it's being moved out by the lime grass. We have people from Lake Forest down who are running out and buying the lime grass because it's prettier on their lakefront and when they look down from their deck or their swimming pool. So, the mayor said, well, gee, now there's an industry. We could start selling that. Not only, we're removing it here, we won't destroy it, we'll just sell it, to the folks down here, and they can have the invasives. That is still going to seed, it's not wise, but those are some of the issues that we face. But we look at it from a bigger picture right now, and that's what's exciting. I mean, you could be sitting at the table helping make the decisions. There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't.
More generally, what still needs to be accomplished at Waukegan Harbor?
At Waukegan Harbor or in the Waukegan Extended Area of Concern?
At Waukegan Harbor.
Okay. At Waukegan Harbor, then we're defining this area right here. We're not talking about anything north of here, and we're not talking about anything south of here. This was all Diamond Scrapyard, and it's under, possible development. There's issues there. This, as of the end of this summer, it has been turned back to the city of Waukegan for their decision on its public use. This area here, the Coke site. Bombardier has decided to accept the invitation of the governor of Wisconsin and move the last residual remnant of their unit up to Pleasant Prairie. And they will not be here. That's a research and development unit. They took over this portion of the old outward marine unit, and they're only using the first third of the building, and this is where the first clean two-stroke motor was developed in the world, right here, about 1999, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe off a year or two. But it wasn't developed overseas, it was developed right here. Unfortunately, with all the bad press, that wasn't a noteworthy thing. I think it's rather nice to think that here in Waukegan, that the research and development went on right here for the world's, first clean two-stroke engine. That unit is going up to Pleasant Prairie. This site now has to be analyzed because you don't know what plumes may have gone under here because it's covered. When we pulled off the cement floor here and peeled it back and removed it, the trichloroethylene plumes and the DNAPL plumes and the extra holding tanks and some PCBs that we found in these extra places after you were able to peel back the foundation, there was extra contaminants. So to tell you exactly, I can't be absolutely accurate, but I can tell you on this site, after Bombardier moves, then this whole building site will need to be analyzed for reuse and what might be under it. This site is open to development by the city right now. I mean, they can begin the planning. They will have to settle their disagreements between how much Larson Marine owns of this and how much the city owns, and it all came in with this settlement because Larson had to give up slip 3, and they were given slip 4, but they also had boat storage area around there, so they've taken areas here that they claim was part of the settlement, and the city has a difference of opinion. They have to settle those opinions. You need to settle where you're going to put, some of the boat storage. You have the reuse of this site, how it will be reused once the DNAPL and the trichloroethylene and the residual PCBs, et cetera, are removed from here. Because it's such a liquid site, and really, the water table is only 1 foot. And this was wetlands in 1970 right here. I mean, it's very difficult. But you will have to, perhaps, and we should know by end of June, we may have to leave some of those contaminants on site. And so reuse of this site will be very difficult, thoughtful, and hopefully in the long run, if we do it right, everyone's best interest. You can't please everybody all of the time, but hopefully bringing all the users together, and saying, what are our needs? We did this down at the Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie, and I would have to give my hats off to Joyce O'Keefe from Open Land. She did a fantastic job when she brought all the users together when you were given 225,000 acres of land and said, well, here's the part for the public, and okay, what does the public want? What do the horseback riders want? What do the hunters want? What do the bikers want? How do you want to use this site? You had the, cemetery that wanted to go in down there. So when the users got together around the table and you heard what the horseback riders needed and what the bikers needed, and they both said, when yours comes and I meet them on the trail, it was like, oh, that's your problem. And everybody was thoughtful, and we can figure that out. And so you listen to what the needs are. You listen to the needs of the piping plover and the Blandings turtle and the parasailers. This is evidently one of the best places in Illinois to parasail, and they come up here, and it's really pretty, to see these sails up there. But they need to come down right in the shoreline, and that's where the little piping plover happens to nest, right in the near shore in the little stones. And if you're landing your parasail, you don't want to get whooshed out to the lake, and you're not looking for some teeny little gray egg that's stuck in little gray stones, And even if it's a day-old little puffball, you're looking at your parasail as you're coming down. You're not looking at a little teeny-weeny puffball. You might, even if you hit it, you might not ever know. Your foot goes into the sand and it covers up, and that's that. So there's just thoughtful people around the table on the reissues, and not in the closed door. And I guess that's what I would say. And now that people can come down and say that they can use it, they're much more able to come down than trying to ask the general public, 90,000, 92,000 people, to say, can you come help us clean the harbor? Because it looks clean to them. You know, after all the trash barrels and, you know, debris is taken away, it's mowed and, you know, so what's wrong? It's blue, you know, they don't understand. It's the sediment underneath that needs to be cleaned. Now they're beginning to get it. And we're working a lot with the students. We did something really exciting, kind of innovative, with the fish consumption signs. And I'm sorry I didn't bring one with me, but I can, you know, send you an email set and you can include them in. A year ago, December, the US EPA said, we need to get out the message of fish consumption, because really so many people fish off of here and eat it. And I said, well, you know what? There's lots of kids who just love to draw. And so I went to the school district and talked to some of the curriculum people and the art teachers, and we made up a little set of rules on one page. You need to have easily understood in 37 different languages. So your message has to get across. And we'll do this with 4th and 5th graders, because they're really open to this kind of thing. And they like to draw. This would be kind of fun. It's not a sports team. It gives other people a chance. And we need to have you show which part of the fish is good to eat. And someone said, well, here's the yummy part. So that the kids ended up calling that the yum. That's the fillet. You chop off the head, you chop off the tail, you chop off the belly, and you chop off the back fin, because that's where the fat is and that's where the PCBs collect. So once you lop off those, the fillet is left. That's the yum. So they were told to show the yum, make sure you had a pregnant mom, children, grandparents, and the parts of the fish, you know, and how to clean it. And the art teachers were really excited, and some of them had, you know, well, I'm doing cartooning with my kids. Well, I'm doing this stylistic thing. I'm doing this. Whatever you want. We had 484 applicants in a 1-month period, and we had 5 judges that went from someone down, the head of the somebody down at US EPA. The mayor was part of the judging team. Julie Weber from Little Fort Media was wonderful. We had 5 different judges, and they had to go through 484 different pictures. And there's lots of different ways to represent how to eat a fish or clean a fish. And they were great. And we got 12 winners, actually 13 winners, because 2 kids worked on the same picture, so double winner. And had a big celebration down at City Hall. Their parents came. It was done bilingually. We had the pictures all blown up. We had one of the pictures done on a cake. Jewel did it on a cake. Kids were all dressed up. They were so proud. And these are children that aren't your athletes. You know, they are kids who don't always speak English really well, but it was something, a community participation. Grandparents were there, parents were there, with just tears in their eyes. I'm so proud of my child. They've never won anything before. And picture in the paper. Their signs were then reproduced. Julie Weber at Little Fort Media did a wonderful job working with us to get all of the details and enhancing the kids' artwork. There are signs, there are 4 signs here, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are signs at the boat launch here, the public boat launch. There's signs along here. There's signs in the captain's cabins and in the fish cleaning station on how to clean fish. And it's got where you go on a website if you really need to know more and which fish to eat. It's got the kid's name and the kid's school on the side. And it will be put on a web tour so that the families and people can walk, you know, from one to another or drive, etc., and see their own artwork. It'll be up for 5 years. And it's a way to bring the community in and address an issue in a bilingual manner that was basically using one international word, yum. So, does that answer a little bit?
Yeah.
But
well, in the interest of
Yes.
time, we have about 20 minutes.
Sure.
I'm going to go through some
Sure.
questions. We understand that the Citizens Advisory Group has a partnership with a similar group in Russia. Could you tell us about that,
Yes.
please?
Dr. Elena Kuzavanova, whose husband is Dr. Victor Kuzavanov. Sorry, Victor. Victor is the director of the Irkutsk State University Botanical Gardens in Irkutsk, Siberia, Russia. You have China. You have Mongolia sitting on top of China, and then you have Siberia sitting on top of Mongolia. the headwaters of Lake Baikal, the world's largest single freshwater lake, is in Mongolia. And we have 20% of the world's freshwater supply in the Great Lakes. Lake Baikal was formed by tectonic plates separating, and it is still separating by about that much each year, getting wider. It is over 1.25 miles deep. You can see 40 feet down absolutely clearly. I don't care what you drop down. You can look, and there it goes. You know, there it is. You can see across it. In World War II, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, to shorten the distance to get arms and supplies, they just took the train and laid the track right across the lake, you know, and cut time off getting supplies, you know, and arms, etc. They don't do that anymore, but we couldn't do that on Lake Michigan. And in about 2000, 2001, I had a call from the College of Lake County. College of Lake County Biology Department was calling and saying, look, my partner was in Lake Baikal this summer on a floristic study program with people at Irkutsk State University, and the wife of the gentleman leading this troop, the professor leading this investigation and floristic study, was asking in very halted English, please, does anybody know how to clean their water in Lake Baikal? Because they had a huge Baikal paper plant at the bottom of the lake, kind of where Gary would be at the foot of Lake Michigan. Their lake is long, like ours. Here's a picture of Lake Baikal. And the Baikal's paper plant is down here. And they were very concerned because there are lots of PCBs. There are lots of PCBs coming in from the communities from Mongolia and coming off this very big river here. It outflows in the Inagra River and goes up to the North Sea. So it's very big. It has the world's only freshwater seal. Is here. It's called the Nerpa. And they were very concerned about the Nerpa, among other things, and they obviously didn't want any contamination. Their lake is 25 million years old, and she was asking for help all around the world. And so this fellow from the College of Lake County said his office partner served on the CAG. So Dick called me up and said, hey, Susie, do you think you could help Elena, you know, a little bit, give her some information on how you've gone about things? And I said, sure. And there was a quick email from her, and it was so sweet, and she knows that I had chuckled over this. But it was in halting English and said, do you put your bad persons in jail for polluting? How long do you keep them there? You know, it's very hard to put polluters in jail here. Very hard. They don't even like to acknowledge that they polluted. And that we all know. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And she was having the very same problem there. But their infrastructure was more late 1920s, 1930s, when we were at the year 2000. And that's just the pre-perestroika, post-perestroika, Russia, and Soviet Union. So their tools for identifying these things weren't quite where we were at that time. But boy, they've jumped, and they really are working very hard right now. Elena is a hydrobiologist, and her job was to measure a lot of the pollutants on the lake. So it was noted very quickly that we needed to get somebody over there, so we sent a courier over with a lot of the International Joint Commission and the US EPA materials for the Great Lakes, the Atlas of the Great Lakes, and how we went about in the late 70s and early 80s identifying our problems, and how we were addressing them, you know, especially in our 43 areas of concern, but also in some of the smaller areas that, you know, weren't at that higher level, but still didn't want to live with their local pollution problems. So we sent a courier over. The courier arrived back after 2 weeks, just before Christmas. This all happened very quickly, and said she wants to come here really badly. And so we made that arrangement. She was here in March. On March 23rd, 2001, we signed an agreement between the Waukegan Harbor Citizens Advisory Group and the Lake Baikal Group, and we have had a full working partnership ever since. We have been there. She has been here. Hopefully, Elena will be back here next fall to celebrate the 10th anniversary of our partnership. Again, I would say that if she is able to come back and you would like to have her give a presentation at Lake Forest College, be our pleasure to provide you that opportunity. And, you know, we've learned from them, we've helped them, and they've helped us. I mean, they produced, you know, the first book that is, I should have brought that one, this happened to be in my briefcase, but they relate to the world's freshwater supplies here and there. Each of us has 20%, so together our partnership, our little tiny partnership, represents 40% of the world's freshwater supply. And that's pretty neat that just local citizens did this.
Are there any ways that citizens can get more involved in current political activities involving the Waukegan Harbor or the Great Lakes in general?
Oh, I'd like to invite you right up to Waukegan. As of right now, I spoke to Kathy as we were coming in the door. With our grant, for the Great Lakes Restoration Grant, the $1.43 million, I told you there's there's 1/3 on the Doodle area, 1/3 at Bowen Park, and 1/3 in education and PR and monitoring. And I'm not sure what opportunities you would have at the college, but certainly along here, there's no real research that's been done on this because these have just grown in the last 20 to 25 years. It was just a little dinky shoreline. And then all of a sudden you've got, you know, a quarter of a century later, you've got a full operating interdunal, you know, area that's seeing plenty of migratory birds, but there's insects, there's plant material. Yes, we have a rough inventory in 2001, and we're doing another one right now up in Bowen Park, finishing one there. But there's lots of, you know, getting down to sedges and things like that, because here's a community that's 25 years old. You know, what's in it? What are the amphibians using this? What are the insects using this? There are so many. There's macroinvertebrates. How are they surviving and working in here? And we would love to be able to design a walkway through here that does not provide so many impacts on the actual high-quality Dunal area, but still allows citizens to reach this area and to observe, whether it's photography or, you know, whatever, you know, painting, whatever, along here, so that we'd like to, you know, a raised boardwalk that is leads or green, and that would be compatible with biker needs and things like that. Planning bike trails, you know, things like that. What do people want down here that would allow them to get to Wisconsin, and what are safe, because you can't go through a national security area, but you do have opportunities through some of these. You have this high-quality Dunal area that ties in with your ravine down here, you know, the Open Lands Ravine. You know, how can we tie them together so that people want to visit both and want to do it by car or by bike or something like that? There's a lot of research that can be done up here, certainly within this Glenflora stream. Macroinvertebrates, this whole wetland in here. We would, if there's money in the federal budget next year for Great Lakes restoration, this will certainly be an area that we will be looking at for next funding and research. So, you know, I'd say it's everything from media development, so that all people understand this and are invited to the table to become friends of Bowen Park or friends of the Dune, you know, and things like that, to website development, to actual just down and dirty research. It's pretty cold up here, by the way, a lot of days. Even, you know, this week there was the wind was blowing sideways and we were being sandblasted. But if you're studying the piping plovers, you got to be out there. And it's about 1.5 miles up here. So it's a long walk up here, you know, being blasted by the sand. So, yeah, lots of exciting things.
Regarding Lake Effect, Nichols' book, what is your professional opinion of the book?
I think she had some very legitimate concerns as to how her sister happened to contact cancer from the Waukegan area. We had a very interesting discussion when she was interviewing me, and I'm not sure if I have it with me. She had a preset thought that her sister did a lot of swimming down here. They both loved being down at the lake, and everybody did. And prior to this being built here, this was all swimming beach down here. So you had industry here, swimming beach here, the goop coming out here, people fishing, boats anchored here. And this was a swimming beach, but it was only this skinny. And so if you're on a bike and a kid, you were going to come down and go the shortest route to get to the lake. You're not going to go the longest route and, through industry, to get over here. Heck, your friends were down here. So her sister did a lot of swimming down there. She loved it. And I asked her where they grew up, and she shared with me it was on the north branch of the Waukegan River, and there were little mom and pop farms, along there, dairy farms and potato farms and things like that. And we got our milk from there and things like that. But there was also contaminants along there from other industries, small industries. So I think she began to realize that there probably were other vectors for cancer to reach a Waukegan citizen, whether you lived up in this area and it was mesothelioma, I didn't pronounce that well, presentation of cancer, or whether it was a carcinogen that might be more affiliated with a PCB, and whether it would have come from where you live and the milk you were drinking. And nobody thought anything about it. There was the cow that was right by you, and it was your neighbor, and of course, it was pasteurized. Drink it, but we weren't looking. It's like until recently we weren't looking for pharmaceuticals in our drinking water, things like that. So it wasn't bad. It was just we opened up more possible vectors, and I think she was reflecting on how the various parts of their life in Waukegan could have produced, cancer in her family. And, she was working through that, and I respect her for trying to do it in a thoughtful manner.
What might be the impact of a book like Lake Effect?
I'm not sure. I really don't know, and I don't mean this to put down something or to raise something above a different level. PCBs, and just that term, is so generically thrown around today, and they are found in so many portions of our previous life, in the just industrial process and the things that we use, that I think we almost take it for granted right now. And I'm not sure. I think when books like that come out, people read them and they say, oh yes. But, I just don't know. There have been some really nice books written, and hers is certainly among them. And I don't know what the long-term effect will be on the general public on how we use these things. And I don't know how long our human memory will have of the negative effects of this. What, in 65 years, when I presume I won't be here, and you can look back and say, wow, I remember when. But let's say this is more recreational or housing, etc. No one will remember. It'll just be a thing of the past. The Chicago fire was a Chicago fire. It was there. PCBs were there in the harbor. PCBs were, asbestos is in Montana, asbestos was here. I don't know how to answer the question. I really don't.
So we are about to wind this up. I want to ask a question that I don't know if you would want to answer.
I'll try.
If it was you're the only person at the table from your group.
Yes.
What would this look like?
Well, if it was me, I happen to have a very strong number of people who, for the 21 years that we've worked on this, have come to a collaborative vision that it will have some development for residential, it will have some community recreational, it will have a wide variety of community recreational. It won't be all one or all of another. And it will be respectful of the past, and it will also look at the pre-settlement, and it will be able to, develop this area here. It's known as, here's our map and our focus map. This area is now called B1 because we've done the swimming beaches. No, this is B1 and this is B2. But it would provide on the Great Lakes, an opportunity for visitors, for local residents to have jobs and to have homes, but it would have open space, and it really is cold up here in the winter, so you have to take those things into consideration. And so you want to put your housing most likely back where they're going to be warm, and it ties in. But it would be to, as I say, respectful of the legacy of the pollution, but reusing it so that many people can use it and enjoy it, either for your viewscape or your actual participation or for the natural habitat, because we are losing species in a very rapid, quantity, both by climate change and by the way that we handle land. So that if we're thoughtful in our redevelopment, we will see the whole picture. And I think there's an awful lot of people at the table right now that are looking at it the same way that I look at it. So I don't have to speak just for myself. I can quite comfortably speak for quite a number of people.
Is there anything you'd like to add? Is there something that we didn't ask that you would have liked us to ask you?
No, what I like about what you're doing is that you're integrating the whole into the picture, and that you have to look at this from a watershed perspective. You have the Great Lakes watershed and all of the vectors that feed into the problems of the Great Lakes and the possibilities of the Great Lakes and what we have to do. It is 20% of our water supply. It's 90% of the U.S.'s fresh water supply. That's pretty significant. And right on our western edge in Illinois, the Mississippi River is the third largest freshwater river in the world. I mean, Illinois is sitting in a rather unique sector where the western edge of the eastern hardwood forest, where the southern edge of the northern pine forest, the southern tip of Illinois has the northern edge of the cypress swamps, in that area, and we're the eastern edge of the tall grass prairie. We have an enormous number of species here. So, I look at this as just, you're looking at it from a small macrocosm, and I'm looking at it from a big one, from the watershed perspective. And that's one of the things that we introduced with Lake Baikal in our discussion, is that, you can't just look at a Lake Baikal paper plant. You have to have them, at the table, but you also have to look at it, your whole watershed, and that means Mongolia and the Buryat Republic and Siberia. It's bigger than just one thing. And then we have to look at it locally from the Dead River watershed and the Waukegan River watershed, because it goes through the community of Waukegan. And just because you live on one side of the road, you can't have different rules for the other side of the road. So I like the way you're asking the questions. I really do. But, I think looking at everything from a watershed perspective, taking that away is really important wherever you live in this country. I don't care where it is. It can be any state in the union or any province. And how you look at a watershed, whether you're coal mining and taking the top of the mountain off, or whether you're tar sands, trying to mine the sands, and cutting down the forests up in Saskatchewan and areas like that to pull up a new source, because the price of gas and oil are at the point now where it's cost effective to start doing a harder type of withdrawal of natural commodities from the earth. I think we have to look at it at a watershed basis, and that's a responsibility that I would gladly hand over to you, and you can have my map. Holes and all.
Well, we appreciate your time today. And we also appreciate the work you've done for this community for so many years.
Well, thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you here.
Well, it's been fun to be
Thank
here.
you.
We would really like to have you at the table with your magnifying glasses and your research.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay.
That was an hour and a half.
Okay.
Art said no more than an hour and a half.
Okay. Water.